I'm Terry Reiber, and I'll be your host at PACTV. And today we have Bruce Fenton, President of the Bitcoin Association. Thanks, Bruce, for coming to PACTV.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I came from the investment business. I used to work at Morgan Stanley. That's where I started my career. And then I started an independent firm called Atlantic Financial back in 1994. We were the first full-service investment firm to use the internet. So I was always interested in new trends and new technologies, and also interested in emerging markets. So we did a lot of research and looking into markets like India and China back when people were very uncertain about where they were going to end up, and very interested in technology, both investing and because we were using technology ourselves. And then over the years became more focused on big picture economic consulting. So these days, most of what I do is serve a smaller number of larger clients, not so much as active in getting into the details of every specific investment, but more about big picture trends about what they do. And sometimes outside of investing, sometimes more even bigger picture than that, kind of where the world is going, that kind of thing.
Okay. And what is Bitcoin?
So Bitcoin is digital money. It's basically sort of, you could call it the email of money in some ways. And what I mean by that, basically, it's a new form of currency, and it's also a mechanism of transferring something of value. So if you think for a minute about what money is, really, for most of people today, if you look at people who have bank accounts or investment accounts, it's really just a ledger entry, okay? So if you have an account at a big bank, and I have $10,000 and you have $10,000, and I give you two, then you have $12,000. Why? Only because a ledger says that you have it. Only because you're trusting that bank. And generally, that system, at least for that purpose, works fairly well. There are some chances that there will be errors or issues where it wouldn't be accurate, but usually the big, large, trusted organizations are pretty good. But there are some drawbacks of having that central control. You have to trust a bank that their ledger is good. So what Bitcoin did, basically, they took this ledger, which is kind of the cornerstone of what modern money is, and if you said, what is a great way to make sure it's trustworthy? Well, they made it public so everybody could have access to it. And they put it out there in open source and have millions of computers that can download it, and you have this massive ledger so everybody knows what everybody has, which is a great idea. Now the only problem with that is you say, well, wait a minute, if everybody knows what everybody has, what about privacy? And Bitcoin solved that also by using cryptography, similar to, I could use the analogy of people who have a PGP key on email, where you have a key and that is linked to you, and people know that that's really yours, and you can decode emails. So that's technology like that, cryptography, made it so that you can have all of these entries that are listed on this huge public ledger be tied to a number that's not tied to your identity. So you have both the privacy, and you're putting it out there kind of in the town square, so to speak, for everybody to see. So you know that it is really a true statement that what you own. In that same example, if I had $10,000 worth of Bitcoin and you had 10,000, I sent you 2,000, we would have a ledger entry forever, those two numbers. Now, only you and maybe not even one of us would know what the other party was. I could send you Bitcoin without knowing who you were. Only really the person who has that knows that it's really theirs, who controls that private key, which is how you would decode Bitcoin, if you follow me. But basically that's what it is, and there's a lot of advantages to that. It's also a very good transfer mechanism. You can move Bitcoin very rapidly anywhere in the world. You don't need a third party. You don't need a bank account. You don't need a lot of paperwork. You just need an address, and you can send it. You can send it instantly. As an experiment, I sent 85 people in the world $1 each, all over the world. I sent people in Kenya and Anchorage, Alaska, and right here locally, sent them $1 each, and I was able to do it in probably 15 minutes of my time. So there's some advantages, but the main interesting thing about it is that there's nobody in charge of it. It's decentralized, so there is no trusted party. You don't trust a bank, and therefore you don't have the issue. For one thing, you don't have the fees, but you also don't have the issues that come with that. You don't have things like what happened in Cyprus, where you had huge amounts of money taken by the government. All of these things are not possible with Bitcoin. So that's in a nutshell what Bitcoin basically is.
Okay, so assuming Bitcoin is a currency, how does a Bitcoin start its life, and is there a limit to the number of Bitcoins that can be created?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when the creator of Bitcoin designed them, who is anonymous, no one knows who he or she is, the name is Satoshi Nakamoto, which is we assume a pseudonym. When this person or people created Bitcoin, they created this system that I basically described, this kind of decentralized, cryptographically backed system of transfer and this currency. And then in thinking, he or she said, well, how would you issue this? How do you make it? Now we've designed a better mousetrap. We've built something better, a better form of currency. How do we fairly give it to people? Do you just break it up and give rich people a bunch and poor people a little less? Or do you do it by identity? Everybody gets an equal amount? What would be a fair way to issue this? And they came up with this concept called mining, where basically you verify the transactions. So those transactions that I mentioned in this decentralized list are being verified. So that's a very useful service to Bitcoin. And then also you're essentially, the simplest way I could describe it is, it's not exactly accurate, but for simplicity's sake, you're basically solving a math problem. And that is a fair way that they felt, if you solve this, you will be issued Bitcoin. So there was a schedule that originally issued a larger amount, and that's gone to smaller. Now it's about 25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And it's a fixed schedule that's right in the code when Bitcoin was issued. And we do know that the total number that it will ever be issued is set and capped at 21 million. There is no Federal Reserve or anything else that can issue more. And that's actually, from an economic standpoint, one of the real cornerstone values of Bitcoin, is that no other party can devalue your currency by issuing more. It is not controlled by a person or people or a Federal Reserve officer. It is controlled by a mathematical algorithm, which is a much more fair way to distribute. So it serves as a point to distribute, and the cap serves as a point to keep control of knowing exactly what your issuance will be with complete certainty.
So if someone wanted to get a Bitcoin, what would they do to get their hands on some Bitcoin? Let's say somebody in the audience here who's never had a Bitcoin in their life and they want to go out and buy some or get some, what would they do?
There's a couple ways. One way you can simply buy Bitcoin, and also it's important to know you can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. When I mentioned I sent $1 worth, today at the time of this program, Bitcoin is at around $330 per coin. Mm-hmm. And it fluctuates quite a bit. It's fairly volatile. But you can send a tenth of a coin right now, which is worth $31, $33, something like that. And you could send 1/100th of Bitcoin all the way down to a unit called a Satoshi, which is way, way less than a penny. So it's important to note, if somebody wants to buy, they can buy a partial Bitcoin. You don't have to even buy a whole one. Or you can buy, some serious Wall Street investors have bought hundreds of millions of dollars worth. And the way you can buy them through going to basically an exchange, which is similar in functionality and the look to what people would be familiar with if they have an investment account at a stock exchange or stock brokerage firm. And there are services that are maybe even one step more simple than that, like two of my favorites are Coinbase and Circle. Circle is a local company. They're based in Boston, and both of these companies have been very successful in being well-funded by very top-name venture capital firms. And the nice thing is that they're at a kind of race to make it easier and simpler. They're both fairly simple. With Circle, you can go on and sign up, put your name and address, put your credit card in. You can own Bitcoin in seconds. And the other way to get Bitcoin is by selling something for Bitcoin or offering a product or service for Bitcoin. And that's a great way to do it too. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised how many people, even now while this technology is relatively new, how many people will pay for things with Bitcoin. So if you're selling something, a car or a piece of electronics, or especially if you have a service, if you say, I'll paint a portrait of you or whatever, and I accept Bitcoin, there's a good chance you're not going to get tons of customers for it. But because there are so many kind of dedicated adopters in this space who really care about it and want to use it, you will probably get one or two diehard people, depending what you're selling. So that's another way to get Bitcoin, by offering something and offering a product and then you can have your phone. You have a code, your own code, which is public, and you're able to show that to anyone, and they can put their phone up and send you the coin. There's other ways to do it other than a phone, but phone is the most simple way.
And is there any worry that somebody could corner the market on Bitcoin, like some multi-billionaire could just go out and buy up most of the Bitcoin, or is that pretty hard to do?
It would be hard to do. Bitcoin is small right now. The market capitalization is $6 billion or so, which is trivial in terms of real world, massive global financial world. There are single mutual funds that have more than 10 times that, and there are sovereign wealth funds, and I'm not even talking about real currencies. Even failed countries with bad economies have oftentimes quite a bit more value. So it is possible for somebody to definitely have a huge piece. Now, would there be damage of that? Not really. There's not. It would cause prices. It would cause the price to go up. Actually, if somebody bought, say somebody said, okay, the total market cap is $6 billion. I'm going to put $6 billion, and we obviously couldn't buy all the coins because some people wouldn't sell. So that would just drive the price way up.
They'd be forcing you to buy,
yeah,
jackets or T-shirts or whatever it is to try to get it, right? Or
well, they could go on the exchanges and just keep buying.
Oh, okay.
And some Wall Street firms, there are some large firms that have gone on there and bought tens of millions of dollars for different hedge funds or for different hedge funds or other investments who bought, bought the Bitcoin. So you could do it. If somebody wanted to buy billions worth, it would be difficult, but possible.
So you said there's $6 billion worth of Bitcoins out there. How many people do you think are holding? I mean, it's probably you don't know, but is there some sort of a feel? Is it 1 million people holding this $6 billion, or how many people are participating?
I believe there's a couple million unique wallets.
Oh, okay.
And it's hard to say. People could have multiple wallets, but it's probably somewhere in that neighborhood, probably 1 million or 2 million.
So it's a real niche of people when you think about it.
Yeah, it is a small number. There's estimates all over the place. Some people think it's more. We know it's unlikely to be much more than a couple million because there's only so many wallets out there.
Yeah.
There could be a few million Bitcoin holders, but it's probably somewhere quite a bit less than that because there's people who have multiple wallets.
Do people have to be concerned that if they're putting their money, sort of converting it into Bitcoin or other, that they're maybe doing something illegal, or that it's a contravention to some state or federal law or some international law, or is it pretty much open in every country so far that you can do it without concern?
Depends where they are. Right? There are some countries that have taken a fairly hard line against it, North Korea and others. Fortunately, most of the world has not gone to the point where they're saying owning Bitcoin is illegal. I don't know of any mainstream type of place that has done that. There are most of the regulations. The United States is fairly heavy on regulation compared to a lot of the world. It's a fairly heavy regulatory place. And even in the United States, even being a very heavily regulated country, there isn't any jurisdiction, even of all the 50 states, who's gone to the point to say Bitcoin's illegal. Nobody's even close to that. Really, it's just a variance of how accepting and open they are to Bitcoin businesses, how much you're allowed to. And it's very, very different if you have Bitcoin or I send you Bitcoin or you buy Bitcoin. That's quite a bit of difference between saying you want to set up your own Bitcoin bank or your own Bitcoin store, you want to take other customers' money and those kind of things. So we would expect different degrees of regulation within that. But no, as far as owning Bitcoin, it is definitely legal in the United States for sure, and that's been confirmed by FinCEN and existing laws. It's definitely legal for you to buy and own Bitcoin in the United States and pretty much every other country in the world.
Do you think it'll stay that way, or do you think the governments will start taking a closer look at it?
Now that it's out, it will be, I think, harder for them to go back on that, and especially if this technology, if it is not successful, nobody will really care. But if it is successful, I think it will be harder for them to put on more regulations, especially anything really strict and onerous, like saying you can't own it. It would be like saying you can't have social media or something like that. That when it's already, and some countries have tried that actually. There are countries who've tried to ban YouTube or ban social media, and they have a big backlash from their citizens. And they're not typically countries like the United States, as tough as we can be on certain regulations. We're not at a point where we have the government having a significant chance of banning Twitter or Facebook or something like that. I don't think there's even a motivation from that within the politicians. It would take a lot of factors to do that. So hopefully Bitcoin, if it succeeds, will be similar to that, and it will just kind of become part of the way. And some governments may not like it. It does decrease their power in some ways, but they're going to have to deal with it just like they had to deal with Twitter, and it will cause change. It may cause entire systems to change just like Twitter and social media did.
Yeah, okay. Some people are saying that this is going to be a game changer. I mean, what do you think of Bitcoin? What does it mean, do you think, in terms of social change or cultural change? How do you think this is going to play out?
So that's a great question. One of the important things to remember about Bitcoin is, and this took me a little while once I got really into this space some time ago, which is this is a new invention. That list that I mentioned, this decentralized list, is called the blockchain. And this blockchain technology goes beyond this currency, and it has all kinds of other applications. So the currency may or may not succeed. I hope it does. I think it will. But I'm absolutely convinced that this new invention is something whose time has come. It will be here in some form or another. And what that means in terms of your question is it means a disruption in a lot of things. Basically anything that is centralized now, where you have centralized power and authority and control, in some cases will be eliminated, in other cases will change, in other cases will have competition, and in almost all cases will morph in some way, just like the internet caused great change in everything. In some industries and cases it completely disrupted and made other things obsolete.
Right.
And in other things it changed. But even you can't really find any business that's completely unaffected by the internet now. It has changed the way that we do things and the way that we think. And the ability to eliminate trusted parties for not just the exchange of value, but anything where you have a trusted party. It opens up all kinds of new doors to smart contracts and governance and the way that organizations are run and the way that, and this is a better mousetrap. It's a better system. And just like when checks came along, you used to have to lug money. If you had gold, you'd have to lug it and have guards, and you'd have bandits and all these issues. And then someone came up with the idea to have a check, and they were a trusted party, the first trusted party, that said we're going to write a special note with our special seal and maybe a code on it that our branch in this other place knows, and you can just go there on your horseback and present it. And
symbolic representation
exactly.
Of value, basically.
That was a superior system, and it changed the way things were done. And this will be the same. It will change a lot in the way that our world works.
What are some examples, do you think? I mean, you alluded to it a little bit, but what do you think would be some real prime examples of how this sort of blockchain architecture technology will change the way we live and do business?
Anything right now where you look at strong centralized organizations, and some that come to mind are definitely finance and financial and banking, insurance.
So this could eliminate banks down the road, possibly?
It will be a long time before it maybe eliminates banks, but it will certainly, I think, transform banks quite a bit and make them maybe almost unrecognizable in some ways. In maybe for banking in even more significant way than the internet. But the internet has made things quite a bit different from, I mean, it was just a little while ago, it was only a couple decades that banks operated in an entirely different way. I remember when I was a little kid, the first time that we saw an ATM machine that could be used at a bank other than the bank that it was.
Right.
And before that, they didn't have any ATM machines. You had to get your money when the bank was open. And then somebody came up with this concept that you could have an ATM card and you could use it somewhere else. And then it was years later that they actually made those ATM cards linked with Visa and MasterCard. For years, they weren't linked.
I remember Ing came out too, where you put your money in a bank, but there was no bricks and mortar. It was just a virtual bank.
Right. And those things were all big changes. So we have seen changes, but I think they're going to be more significant. Insurance is another area. Anything with a centralized, powerful authority. Government would be an interesting one too. And not just government in the form of state and federal and local, but governance of organizations. So I think that, and the organization that I'm working with is trying to become more decentralized. I won't be president forever, or maybe even for long. Ideally, what we would have is a decentralized system, kind of practicing what this technology can do, where individual ideas if you say what does an organization do, any nonprofit, if they work on a environmental preserve or whatever, really the leadership allocates resources and they have a certain number of things that they do. A lot of that can be done in a decentralized way with today's technology. So you could say, okay, this person's really good at talking to government officials, or this person's really good at giving speeches, or this person, I want to fund this or that, and the members could fund it collaboratively. So rather than doing a fundraising saying, hey, donate your $1,000 to the XYZ Society because we do all this great work with saving puppies and saving birds. Well, maybe you only care about the birds. And then you could donate, or maybe you only care about this specific scientist and this specific bird, and you could donate to that individual through the shell of the organization. So there will be things like that I think are inevitable, that they will become much more decentralized than they already are.
Are there examples of other implementations of blockchain architecture other than Bitcoin itself that you could point to?
Sure. Yeah, there are. It's a very new area. And it's very exciting. There's a lot of companies that are working on this to try. One company called Ethereum, their whole goal is to make this more easy, and they want to be the backbone sort of software, if you will, that will make it easier for people to do smart contracts and these kind of things. And there are a number of other companies, Counterparty is another one, other groups that make this kind of thing easy. And there's been applications built on these. Some are called altcoins or alternative coins, alternatives to Bitcoin. Some of them were just made to kind of people hoping to get rich. Others had slight advantages or were very similar to Bitcoin. There's one called Litecoin, which for a long time was the second largest. It's around there, one of the largest. And the creator, Charlie Lee, came up with this very clever slogan called Litecoin is silver to Bitcoin being gold.
Oh, right.
And very similar to Bitcoin. It has a transaction time, which is a little bit shorter, and a couple other things. And then there were some that were quite a bit different. Some were exact clones of Bitcoin, some were quite a bit different. For those coins to succeed, they need something, I think, that Bitcoin doesn't already have, and there hasn't been any that have had a real huge advantage. There's some that have minor advantages. So there's a place for those. And then there's things that are not even coins at all, not monetary. You could call it a token or like a membership. You could call it a coin, or you could call it a token or whatever. So you could have your organization and you could issue, and you can do this now. You could issue this coin or system and have anybody who paid a membership fee or met some other criteria. You could say everybody in a town who presents a driver's license and proves who they are or whatever has this token, and that enables them to have these powers or whatever. They can vote or access a website or something like that. One really interesting one is this group called Let's Talk Bitcoin, which is a series of podcasts which talk about this technology. And the creator, Adam B. Levine, created a coin or a token called the LTB coin, basically where he had a lot of volunteers who volunteered to do these podcasts. They weren't getting paid. They were doing it like many podcasts just because they like it. They want to educate. They want to be in the space. So he came up with this idea. He said, well, you're not getting paid anyway. How about we issue you a coin? And then the coin has created value, because then he says, okay, every time you do a show, I'm going to give you, I don't remember how much the number is, called 300,000 of these tokens, these coins. And they have a system very similar to Bitcoin's blockchain that tracks who owns what. You know who really owns stuff. A couple of people said, hey, wait a minute, this may be kind of interesting. I'd like to buy 500 or $1,000 worth of these just to see if something happens with this. Very much an experiment. And then some of the creators of the podcast said, hey, you know what? I will accept these coins for advertising. And so you create a market, and that's a really great early experiment of where you can use this. And that has all kinds of implications. It's perfect that this is an experiment that's happening in the Bitcoin space, because everybody who listens to these shows is already into this technology, and they get it. But if this works, it's only a short amount of time before something like his platform could be used. There's rights and copyright and payouts and these kind of things are very, very complex in the entertainment business. And there's a lot of demand for content creation, where there's a lot of models of major websites and things like that don't pay providers, but would probably like to have something being given to them that's maybe non-monetary, to be able to track who contributes what and then share in revenues and things like that. That's a very powerful kind of thing. So I think that some technology like that will change the publishing industry. My dad had a friend who was a timpani player on a major sci-fi film, and the soundtrack has been played again and again and again for ages. And he gets these little royalty checks to this day. Every quarter or something, he'll get $180 or something like that. And I've heard of backup singers from some 80s one-hit wonder, and they still get these little checks. That's a big amount of effort. And Google has the AdSense program, and YouTube pays the Partners program. They pay all these people a penny every, these tiny little payments, and some cases larger payments, but they pay a lot of people. That kind of stuff will be changed by this technology, where you'll be able to you could issue tokens to people or coins, maybe monetary, maybe not even monetary. It could be your church or something without a monetary backing for it, that enables people to vote or have whatever powers that the coin creator or the purpose of the coin has.
Boy, it'd be nice to monetize, let's say, clout on Facebook and turn that into some sort of a coin. I know you've got 85,000 followers, so that's got to be worth something. You know what I mean?
I'd be doing all right on Facebook. I do have a lot of people. Reddit, actually, which is as a kind of a social media site, different than Facebook. It's a lot of article sharing and link sharing. They're actually doing something similar to that. They're going to be issuing, and they've hired a couple people from this space. They're going to be issuing some kind of token of some sort, presumably based on how you contribute. I'd be interested to see. I have a lot of Reddit karma, so I'll be interested to see if they give it to existing karma. I kind of hope they don't, in some ways, and I especially hope they don't award for new karma, because then that would change the nature of Reddit. You have a lot of people who just totally go on there to game. I mean, if my goal was to get more karma, I'd just share a lot of pictures of puppies, and and I could have higher karma, but it doesn't necessarily increase the quality. So
perceived value.
Yeah, we'll see what they do, though. But it will be interesting, and you definitely will have. And there's some startups, I think, that are working. They're trying to. It's going to be hard to run against Facebook on anything, because of the network effect that Facebook has. But I'm sure that there are groups that are trying to do exactly that, share something with the content contributors. But that's the way of the future, for sure.
I mean, I've heard that there's even using that technology to do things like to be able to share files with other people, so that no one else can know that you're actually sharing this file with someone else. Or, I've heard these sort of concepts of going dark on the internet, where all your emails, all your conversations, all the files you share, no one knows who you are. It's complete anonymity, and I don't know, can you speak to that? Or?
Yeah, and that's a good use of this technology, and it's a good thing for people. By the way, if you have nothing to hide, it's a good reason to hide things, because you're actually protecting other people's privacy. And there are many, many legitimate reasons that people have to want privacy. Unfortunately, we associate privacy with breaking laws, and we should also remember that not all laws are bad. For much of human history, laws like hiding runaway slaves and things like that have been against the law. So we have to look at morality, and there are still places in this. There are countries where you can get the death penalty for being gay, and you would have a perfectly valid reason for wanting to hide that somebody is gay.
Right.
And that is an absolute valid reason that I don't think most people would argue. That you would want privacy. And there's many, many, spousal abuse and all kinds of reasons. There's very many legitimate reasons that people should have privacy. And you don't have to even be in a country with these kind of issues. Right in our own country, there's many legitimate reasons. And one of the very completely legitimate reasons is I want privacy. I just don't want to tell people what I have. That's a perfectly legitimate reason too. I don't need to feel that I'm in danger because of my identity or because I'm an activist or whatever to have that.
Yeah, I mean, like, some people don't like the fact that you put something on Facebook and it's going to be cataloged and somebody can pull it out 50 years from now, or every one of your emails can potentially be inspected and read, and not even necessarily you've done anything wrong. You just don't want other people to have that ability without your permission to do that.
Right. Yeah, so it's great that if people use this type of technology and encourage more privacy for themselves on the internet, it protects everyone. It protects the blogger who is in an oppressive country who's trying to blog about it, or the women's rights activist in a place where she could die for being a women's rights activist. It protects everybody. The more people that use these things, and it's no one else's business what you that's a, I believe, a human right. I believe privacy is a human right. You shouldn't have to be forced to share anything. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's just that you shouldn't have to be forced to share it. So privacy of finance is, I think, also a human right. It's only a weird coincidence and some other factors that have given governments the idea that they should run money. And because of that, they feel, well, we should have the control of privacy as well. And I think that, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good system just because that's the way it's been.
Well, certainly with the government taking over the healthcare industry, you'd think they'd be looking into technology like this to make sure that they're keeping everyone's medical record at arm's length from themselves, you would think.
Yes.
You know what I mean? What about, you hear complaints that maybe this technology being used for nefarious reasons, like moving money, laundering money, organizations that don't want the government to see what they're up to. Do you think that's a legitimate concern, or do you think that's really just a...
Sure, it's legitimate. What I have said before is that Bitcoin does make it easier for criminals, and even, not all criminals are bad, like I said. In some places in the world, things that most people think should be legal are illegal. And so not all criminals are bad. In fact, sometimes some of the greatest heroes we've had, like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, she made a criminal act. That's what made her famous.
Right.
So not all criminals are bad. But even the ones that maybe most people agree are bad, it will make it easier for them because that's what new technologies do. Shoes make it easier for criminals, and phones make it easier for criminals.
Right.
It makes it easier to rob a bank if you have a phone or a car. Right. And that's what technology does. So you don't want to blame the technology. We say, yeah, sure. Phones make it easier for people to commit crimes. And the internet people worried about that a lot with the internet, that the internet would be used for all kinds of crime. And it is. It's used for tons of crime, way more than anyone ever dreamed. But it's also used for a lot more good than anyone ever dreamed.
Yeah.
And the overwhelming majority of the internet is not used for crime. So yeah, I think that sure, it will be used by criminals of all types, and that's to be expected with any new technology.
So what do you think is the future for Bitcoin? What do you see is going to happen in that space, let's say, in the next 5 to 10 years?
It will be a very interesting next 5 years. I think we're going to know a lot about whether this works or not. This is something that is so profound and radical and amazing and interesting that it really doesn't seem that it will just kind of stay flat. I think it will either die out and fail or will be successful. And if it's at all successful, right now it's still in the almost experimental stage. There are some successes, and I consider it a success for where it is. But in terms of global financial importance and size, it's really at the experimental stage. It's so tiny now. Mm-hmm. The value of all the Bitcoin on planet Earth is worth less than, I think, a third of what Snapchat was acquired for by Facebook, one company, in one space. So it is very tiny. If this works, I think it will be worth significantly more than Snapchat, and on the level of Facebook itself, or Apple, or a piece of a small economy from a third world economy. And any of those scenarios, you're looking at way difference in price and adoption. You're looking at not a million or so people that use this, but millions and millions of people. You're looking at really serious money being put in this, people having significant money. It's much more significant transactions being done. We do have large companies that accept Bitcoin now. Overstock, Dell, Tiger Direct. These are billion-dollar companies that do accept Bitcoin. If this works, we will see, PayPal is in the early stages now. One of their subsidiaries is working with Bitcoin. But if this works, we're going to see so we're going to see two scenarios within 5 years. I think either this works or doesn't. If it doesn't, then this will be an interesting experiment, and something else will come on, most likely involved with this technology that will work. Or And hopefully the more likely scenario is that this does work. And if it does, you're looking at a big change and a lot more adoption, a lot more common. A lot more people will understand this. And it will be so easy that people don't even necessarily need to understand it, like the internet. Most people don't know what IMAP is or how TCP/IP works. They just know something works. And a lot of people don't even know what cloud computing is. But pretty much all email these days is on the cloud. That's why you can have it on your phone and your iPad and your laptop all at the same time. And it's just what people expect. But even that piece of email technology is fairly new. You know, email was around a long time before. You used to have, if you wanted to sync devices, you had to manually download all your emails and sync them up with your laptop. You didn't even bother syncing up with your phone because your phone didn't have email.
Right.
It was syncing up your laptop and your desktop.
Right.
And so that's the way technology works, and hopefully people will find it so easy to transfer money. It will be so easy to do these kind of things that you won't even really notice that it's Bitcoin or know that it's Bitcoin, but you will have a very different world than what we have now.
Or who knows, maybe you're spending money and then behind it converts it to Bitcoin and then converts it back out at the other end.
Absolutely.
I mean, you wouldn't really know.
There's processes that do that now. There's systems where they use the kind of back-end rails where, and this is great for remittances in the poor countries, where Bitcoin is not great for poor people right now, or people who can't afford risk, because it fluctuates quite a bit. But you can freeze the value where it is. There's services that will do this and take out that risk for you. So you could be in Dubai and send money home to auntie in Bangladesh, and the back-end rail could be Bitcoin, and you put in your money in a terminal in Dubai, and it's taken out in rupees or whatever. You put in dirhams or reals or whatever, and it's taken out in rupees or whatever in the country that you're sending to, and the value is the same, and you don't have that, in some cases, fairly huge remittance fee that's taken out. That's technology that works right now. Wow. And so you could have a lot of people that don't really even realize this, and especially with some of these non-monetary uses of Bitcoin technology that we talked about, blockchain type of technology, operating organizations, having insurance, anything that's kind of an if-then function, which is a old computer, the very, very basic things. If you ever actually used BASIC, the really simple computer languages, like if then, if this does this. So you could say, well, if you have an insurance contract and you have an accident, then you get this payout. There's tons of people involved in that process now, and eventually almost all of it can be automated with technology. But in the shorter term, you may see some of these things that just work better. And like the internet, there's a lot of things that people don't even realize. We think of the internet as Facebook and these kind of things, but most of the internet is stuff that is actually not on the web. It's these behind-the-scenes transactions that do things like make ATMs work and make all of this behind-the-scenes stuff work, make it easier. Airlines are still quite a bit behind probably where they should be. It's a pretty antiquated system, but it is much better than it was. You remember 20 years ago, your ticket was everything. The actual ticket had value, and they have this complex system that different airlines would trade these tickets because you'd have connecting flights, and they'd have big stacks of tickets that were worth tons of money, and they'd trade it, and they must have had some kind of exchange. That's been automated, but it's still somewhat broken, and so I think you'll see some of these industries as this technology, which is a better system for many things, becomes more common, that things will work better. People may not even realize why.
Become paperless, for instance.
Yeah.
And they still take your ticket and they scan it as you go through, or they put a little check mark on it for life. I don't know why. So what do you see in your future in the next 5 to 10 years, personally?
Well, this is a very fast-moving and interesting space, so time will tell. I have my existing work that I do with consulting with my clients, which I'm happy with and I enjoy doing. But I am really, really passionate about this space, and I spend a lot of time in it, and who knows what will happen. It is changing every day, and it's really exciting. I think it's thrilling to, most of us in this space use Reddit, and a lot of us never even liked Reddit or used Reddit before, but we use Reddit now because Reddit is well suited for one thing, which is the very fast sharing of information, and you have this up and down vote system. It's for people who don't know, it's basically a system you can post links or ideas, and people can upvote them and downvote them. So that's particularly well suited in a space like Bitcoin, where news changes by the hour, and I get excited to check my news feeds and talk to my friends, because almost every day there's some amazing new and exciting thing, and it's very wild ride. Sometimes it's bad news. You know, there's bad things that happen. There's high profile companies that have gone out of business. There's shady characters. It's a Wild West situation in some cases, and then there's really exciting and overwhelmingly positive new things. Every few days it seems there's some major new venture capital investment. There's companies that I've never even heard of that have come out of the blue, who've developed some new thing. Existing companies that will develop new technology. Just a couple weeks ago, one of them made it easier for people to basically control their private keys, so these organizations that you can buy Bitcoin from, you're still defeating one of the main purposes of Bitcoin. You're trusting somebody else, so you want to have that control. They basically made it easier for you to do that. So it's an exciting space. So who knows what it will be like, but it's definitely an interesting ride for now, for sure.
Well, that sounds great. Is there anything else you'd like to let our viewers know, like if they want to start getting involved with Bitcoin, or if they're looking at a Bitcoin career, or what advice would you give?
Yeah, career is a great thing to look at. There is a huge shortage of developers. You have a lot of people looking for jobs right now, and there's a huge need in the space for developers, and it's moving fast. And that's something, depending on your background, if you're already a developer in some other field, this is a really great way, because you can probably brush up on being a Bitcoin developer pretty quickly. If you're not already a developer, it's still not a hopeless cause, because this technology is so new. If you're good with that kind of thing, you can immerse yourself in it, and maybe, I don't want to be too broad, because it depends on what level of developer and where you are now, but in a matter of months, you could be certainly much better off than you are now, and maybe get a job in this space. There's a lot of hiring. There's a lot of venture capital. It was the #1 area of recipient of venture capital money in the last year. So it's a great place to look for a job, look for entrepreneurial endeavors. If you own a business, you can offer Bitcoin. I would recommend to everyone, this is complex stuff, and it's really, if you're interested in this kind of thing, really take some time to sort of think about it and digest it. It usually takes people a few times hearing something like this discussion that we're having, or there's a lot of great videos on YouTube. I have some. There's some people much better than me, like Andreas Antonopoulos, who, if you just put in Andreas and Bitcoin, you'll find him. People like that who are very, very good at explaining this kind of thing. There's a lot of brilliant minds in this space that you can watch these videos and learn. I think it's worth it for anyone in business or technology especially. I think it's worth it to do a deep dive and kind of spend a day, or at least an hour or two. And usually if you spend a day, you end up getting more and more interested in this, and people who are interested in economics and other things, there's different things that grab people, and they become really into this space. And I don't know anybody who's really done that who kind of backed out after a while and say, oh, it's not as interesting as I thought. Usually you get more and more interested. It's just like following a sports team or something like that. The more you know, the more you want to know. So I'd recommend that to people, definitely. Learn some more. There's a lot of good resources out there, and keep an eye on this technology, because I believe it's going to change the world as we know it.
And like a group like Bitcoin Association, is that what someone who's, let's say, a follower would join, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, you could follow the group on Facebook. There's the Bitcoin Foundation, which I'm also a member of, which is even larger and older organization. There's a lot of groups, there's Bitcoin Talk, which is a large forum. Reddit is pretty good. The drawback of Reddit is that it's sometimes can be kind of a trollish sort of place, but it's good for these purposes overall. And the other thing I really recommend to people to do is they go to a Bitcoin conference, or a meetup even. If you don't feel like putting in the money and time to go to a conference, just go to a meetup, and you meet really interesting people. And they have interesting speakers, and I've been really fortunate to make a lot of new friends in this space. Just some of the most interesting characters that you'll ever meet. And there's all kinds of people attracted to this space. So, going to conferences and meetups is another great thing that I would recommend to people who are interested in this kind of thing.
Well, great, Bruce. Thanks for coming into PACTV,
Great.
and a
Thanks a
pleasure
lot.
to interview you.
Great, thank you.
And
Glad to be
thanks,
here.
everyone, for watching the show.